Boom! Welcome into Sports Bet Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy weekend preview edition. Big game breakdown. Game 2 Eastern Conference Finals. Can the Celtics even it up? Season on the line coming up. Deep dive. We continue our team previews in the NFL. We finish out the NFC West. The Seahawks are up. Their win total is 10.5. We'll get to that and the play of the day before we get out of here. Bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. Let's start with hockey. Not much going on in the world of sports last night. Bad beats. If you had the under 5, vicious push, 2-0 Anaheim with 7 minutes left. 2 goals in the final, 6:27 for Nashville, but they lose in overtime. Series tied at 2, Teddy.
Yeah, and that's tough, man. You're sitting there with a 2-0 game, 7 left in the third. You got to feel pretty good about that ticket. And no, it's not a beat. It's a bad push. But that's a bad push. And, of course, the Ducks end up winning anyway. That wasn't a great result for the books. Anaheim took money, opened about plus 140, closed as low as plus 120. But it's the underbettors who have a lot to bitch at on Friday morning.
All right, bad bets. Orioles bet up from $1.10 to $1.35. They had won 8 straight, that ended a streak of 8 straight quality starts by Bundy. And there was a high-scoring game with these two teams. Detroit gets the win.
Yeah, here's Bundy's quote. I wasn't commanding the ball very well, and they made me pay for it. 3 pitches I left up in the zone, and 2 of them they hit out of the park. It cost me today. Worth noting, Tigers didn't have their biggest bat, Miguel Cabrera. Baltimore didn't have their biggest bat with Manny Machado, and the game still went over 10. A bad bet on the Baltimore side of that one. Jordan Zimmerman pitched a little bit better than the markets expected, and certainly the Tigers' bullpen did as well.
15-cent move on the Yankees, bet up to $1.20. Duffy was dealing. He shuts down the Yankees.
Oh, yeah, this one got me, unfortunately, last night. Fair bit of Yankees money in that ballgame, as you mentioned. And Duffy, right from the get-go, right from the first inning, the Yankees were flailing at his pitches. Yankees scored 7 or more, an MLB high 17 times this season. Not last night. They were a bad bet.
And bad for the books. The Nats-Pirates over, bet up from 9 to 10. 10-4 Pirates flew over.
Yeah, last 14 wasn't pretty for Tanner Roark. Tanner Roark now 7-1-1 to the over in his last 9 starts. Wasn't particularly pretty for Tyler Glasnow either. His first start was totaled at 8.5 and it finished 8. Since then, he's 6-0-1 to the over. So a pair of pitchers who are trending heavily to the over. No surprise they took a ton on over money. No surprise that over cashed. The Pirates all of a sudden on a little uptick. They've won 4 of their last 5.
All right, August 3rd, right around the corner, NFL Hall of Fame game, but never too early to talk football. We're already starting our team previews. How about CG Technology in Vegas? Put out some college football win totals, Teddy.
We got virgin numbers to talk about it. We're going to flash a whole long list of them. Can't go through all of these. Obviously, we're talking about 50 teams, and all from the Power 5 conferences. The SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 all had lines posted. Interesting to note, the highest, of course, you know who the highest is going to be. It's Alabama, lined at 10.5 wins with the over minus 150. What's interesting to me was who's the lowest. Win totals of 5.5. Arizona, Duke, Indiana, Mississippi State, and South Carolina. Those are the lowest rated in terms of win totals, Power 5 conference teams heading into the upcoming campaign.
Alabama's got to go 11-1 to cash the ticket?
Sure. Who's going to bet? Who's going to bet Alabama under 10? Let's put it that way. Do you understand? At 10.5, they might get some under money. At 10, they're not getting any. And we talk about how much a half win means in the NFL. A half win is usually equated to about 50 cents worth of juice. In college, many times a half win is worth far more than 50 cents of juice. Again, Alabama's minus 150 to the over at 10.5. At 10, how much are they to the over? I mean, infinite, because no one is going to bet them under as a 9-win team. It's just not going to happen. So that's one example of how the half point or how the half win is worth so much in college football, even though it's worth a lot in the NFL as well.
All right. I like Washington over 9.5. They play a bad non-conference again. Most of their tough games are at home. How about USC 9.5? Look at that. $1.35 to the over.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's the guy who's getting a lot of preseason love, and USC as a program, obviously, it's never been a talent problem for the Trojans. Even since Pete Carroll left, it hasn't been a talent problem. Every year, their roster or grades out as good or better than anyone in the Pac-12. It's been an execution problem for UCLA in recent years. What about the Oregon program? As we're going West Coast, the Ducks sitting at 8, Pauly. That's not where we're used to seeing Oregon lined. Last year's disaster clearly having effect on the market's view of Oregon moving forward.
That's too high, although Helfrich was a bad coach, but we'll see how Taggart does there. And Levitt, now their new defensive coordinator, they couldn't stop a nosebleed last year. It's been a tough week for Donald Trump. Oh my God, look at this. So bad that the will he last the first term and odds for impeachment were taken off the board in some places, Teddy.
Yeah, and look, this is not a political show. We're going to tell you how it is when it comes to who supports what legislation, but I don't know if I've ever heard a political thought coming out of your mouth, Pauly, and I'm not really a Democrat or a Republican, so we welcome viewers from all political spectrums. That being said, we got to talk Trump. When you're even money to get impeached, that's significant. Jason Logan, at Covers JLo on Twitter, wrote an excellent piece yesterday talking about how Sportsbook AG pulled their Trump betting odds off the board after the news broke about the leaks and all of that. And now, as they put them back on the board, we're talking even money for Trump to get impeached. Of course, low limits, small wagers allowed, but it speaks volumes about where the betting markets think Donald Trump's presidency is going right now.
Why are there low limits on that? Why can't someone unload?
In general, when you're talking about betting non-sports events, the limits are going to be much lower than they are. And of course, it's the kind of thing where it's an action wager. The books are not looking to attract a bunch of wise guy money coming in betting politics. Hence the low limits.
I'll tell you, there's great value on the Rock in 2020 at 125 to 1. I'm just going to throw it out there. Teddy disagrees, but I think he's live in 2020. All right, you have a little rant here, and you want to give sportsbookreview.com a plug.
I do. You know, the sportsbookreview.com, obviously where our show's been hosted. We've been involved with them from the beginning of SportsBit, and we don't chill them a lot. I feel like we should. You know, because this is the truth of it, Pauly. Just about everybody we know that bets offshore, they've run into some issue or another. I've been stiffed more than once. You've known bettors that have had slow pays. Books go out of business. Books don't pay. They slow pay. It really is the Wild West out there for offshore sports books. SBR can legitimately help. They have reviews, rock solid, and you want to be betting on books that are rock solid. We always talk about the importance of betting skills as opposed to handicapping skills. And one of the most important things you can do to improve your betting skills is have more than one account, more than two, and more than three. As many as you can get. Rather than if you have $100, split it up $25 four ways. Bunch of A-plus books, rated books at sportsbookreview.com. They've got free contests, they've got free odds and free pick videos, an active posting forum. I have no problems talking up these guys. SBR does a good job, and that's not just because they've gotten this show, SportsBit, on covers. Very excited about that, Pauly. Should be very good to help improve our viewer counts, which are just going up and up and up, even here in the spring and summer months.
All right, up next, big game breakdown. Celtics season on the line, Game 2 on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Back on SportsBit, Betting Insight today, Pauly and Teddy. Time for big game breakdown. As always, go to SBR Odds and Sportsbook Review. Check out their rating guide. Make sure you're betting with a trustworthy shop out there. Adjusted series price, unbelievable. Cavs are minus 2,700. Cavs are 5.5 in Game 2 on the road, 219.5 the total. There was a lot of the focus on the rest versus rust in Game 1. LeBron James was awesome, 39 points, 7 of his first 8 field goal attempts, point-blank range. He had no problems getting to the basket whenever he wanted. Kevin Love had 32. Tristan Thompson didn't miss, 7 of 7. Outplayed Al Horford. Talked to Sean Grandy on the VSiN radio show I do, Vegas Stats and Info Network, play-by-play voice of the Celtics. If the Celtics keep it within 5 in the rebounding battle, they're 49-12 this year. If they out-rebound their opponents, they're 29-3. Easier said than done. They were 27th in rebounding in the regular season, and they've been dead last in the playoffs so far, Teddy. That's where they have to make some adjustments and do a better job in this game, too.
Well, there's a lot of places where Boston needs to make adjustments if they expect Game 2 to be more competitive than Game 1. And if you're asking me where it starts, it's on the offensive end for the Celtics. I mean, the Cavs defense, let's be real, was a terrible defense in the regular season. They weren't very good in the first round against Indiana. And all of a sudden, they absolutely shut down Isaiah Thomas. Thomas started the game, 2 of 8 from the field until the end of the second quarter. Boston's already down by more than 20. He's got 3 turnovers and 2 field goals made. He got in the lane. He had no good looks at the basket. The Cavs took away his passing lanes. They took away his scoring lanes. Kyrie Irving, quote, "We just had a real high awareness on Thomas." You have to. He can get it going at any time. He has put up huge numbers in these playoffs. For us, we just made a conscious effort on our end to keep all eyes on him at all times. We'll also respect the other guys and make the other guys do things that they're uncomfortable doing. Look, Isaiah Thomas, 7 of 19 from the floor, just 17 points. Only the 4th time in 90 games this year, Pauly, regular season and playoffs, that Thomas has attempted more field goals than he scored points. Tristan Thompson, quote, "He does a great job when teams are dropping with the pull-up threes. For us, we wanted to get the ball out with a hard shoulder for blitzing him. Just force him to give up the ball and make other guys make plays." Thompson continues, "You can't stop everything. If it's Jay Crowder or Marcus Smart with the open threes, we're going to take our chances with the percentage. The guys we can't leave open are Avery Bradley and Thomas."
Here's where it's scary and cause for concern. The last 2 games have been very similar to the start and the battle on the boards. April 5th, 57-42, Cavs at the half, 33-19 in rebounds. Game 1, 61-39 at the half, 28-14 on the boards as well. That would combine to a full game count of 118-81 with a 61-33 rebounding margin. And look at LeBron in 41 minutes, plus 44. Scored more than a point per minute in the opening half of those games with 12 rebounds, 7 assists, and only 1 turnover. And more on the rebounding mismatch. Look at this graphic. Kevin Love, 18 minutes, 20 rebounds. The Boston starters, 161 minutes, 23 rebounds. Come on, guys. Crowder, quote, "A lot of underdogs in this locker room. A lot of guys who had to prove themselves in this league. We've been through the ropes. We've had to prove themselves. It's in our DNA," end quote. This will be their season, Teddy. I mean, you're supposed to get a great effort here tonight because if they lose, it's over and it's 1-2-3 Cancun.
Well, the really scary thing for Boston is that in these basically 2 games that were over at halftime, one to determine home court edge in the playoffs where the Celtics ended up stealing that anyway, despite the fact they lost at home by margin of the Cavs. And then, of course, Game 1 of this series, Cleveland wasn't even hitting threes in the first half of those games. Only 6 of 28 from three-point range in over the 48 minutes of those 2 first halves. That's a little bit scary when you're getting bombed off the floor because in any given game, the Cavs are capable of just lighting it up from downtown, and that hasn't happened yet, at least in the last 2 against Boston. Now, you talked about that Crowder quote where he's saying, hey, a lot of guys who had to prove themselves in this league. It's in our DNA. We're dogs, and I agree with that mentality. I understand that mentality. Isaiah Thomas, quote, "With a team like that, the defending champs, you can't let them hit first. We'll definitely make sure it's different for Game 2. They were the more energized team. There's a reason for that." Of course, he was alluding to the fact that the Cavs had 10 days off prior to the opener in this one. So the rest still not equal for these 2 teams, but at least a little bit better for Boston because Cleveland played a game. That being said, the Cavs 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread on the road in the postseason. Some bettors might have pushed Game 4 at the close at Toronto. If you had Cleveland in that game and you pushed, you need to work on your betting skills more than your handicapping skills. But with the elite teams in the postseason, you make more money on them on the highway. We've seen that with Golden State. We've seen that with Cleveland. But from a spot perspective, it feels like an 0-2 team coming home for Game 3. Even though it's an 0-1 team, a team down 0-1 at home for Game 2, everyone knows if the Celtics don't make this game competitive, that it's going to be a 1-2-3 Cancun situation, Pauly, as you mentioned at the top it's a situation for Boston. They have to bring their A game, and their A game may or may not be good enough because the Cavs, you say, have they turned the switch? They have flipped. Yeah, they flipped that proverbial switch, and they're only getting better, as you mentioned.
Well, yeah, I didn't think they played that well in Game 1. LeBron and Love were great, but Kyrie had, 11 points, and the bench didn't do much either, and it was not bombs away from 3. Up next, deep dive. We finish the NFC West with the Seattle Seahawks, lined at 10.5 with their win total at the South Point. That's coming up next, and the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Wrapping up on SportsBit, Betting Insight today, weekend preview edition. We finish out the NFC West. Next week, we'll start the AFC East. Also Tuesday, Nigel Seeley got a good response when he was on, soccer expert. We'll preview the Europa final between Manchester United and Ajax, and also the Champions League final June 3rd with Real Madrid and Juventus. That should be fun. Looking forward to that. Seattle Seahawks over under 10.5 wins last year. 10-5-1 straight up. 8-8 ATS. 9-7 to the over. All 5 straight up losses came as favorites. Only dogs once all year. Week 7 in Arizona. Also, they were underdogs. That's twice. They were also underdogs in Green Bay as well. Mainstream stats: 19 takeaways, 18 giveaways, 5.6 yards per play on offense, above average. 9.3 yards per rush, below average. 7.8 yards per pass, that's top 5. But they allowed 42 sacks, 6th highest. Defense, 7.2 yards per pass allowed. That was 18th. Huge decline from the second ranking in 2015 and number 1 in 2014. Opposing QB rating of 85, still above the league average. 3rd in sacks, number 1 in the NFL, 3.4 yards per rush. What did they do in the draft, Teddy? And again, the offensive line's a big concern.
Well, let's start with taking a look at those mainstream stats. There was one number that you transfixed. You said they averaged 9.3 yards per rush, and the Seahawks actually averaged 3.9 yards per rush. It was below average. They were not a good rushing team. What amazed me about last year's team was even with those offensive line woes, and even with all the injuries they suffered at wide receiver throughout the course of the campaign, they still averaged 7.8 yards per pass attempt. That's excellent, and it speaks volumes about how good Russell Wilson has been. And again, yeah, they took a ton of sacks. They allowed 42. They gained 42 sacks. We love the defense being able to put pressure on the opposing quarterback. The fact that Wilson probably scrambled out of 20 sacks, more than that maybe, and they still allowed the 6th most sacks in the NFL is something of a concern. So what did Seattle do? Let's start with the draft. Okay. A team that was number 1 in the NFL against the rush last year, they got a beast on the defensive line in Malik McDowell. He's no joke. And one thing the Seahawks have done this offseason, they have finally, Pauly, addressed the offensive line. The number 2 draft choice, Ethan Pokic out of LSU, is just one guy who they picked up. But I actually like the looks of this offensive line. They got Luke Joeckel out of free agency. Out of free agency. And he's never lived up to his number 2 overall status in the draft. But the guy has some talent. There's a couple of... The one thing that offensive line has now that it didn't have a year ago, just about everyone has the ability and the potential to play multiple positions. So if nothing else, they'll be in a situation where they can switch players around if injury strikes. They could not do that last year, and it really hurt them.
Hauschka gone. They signed Blair Walsh, so see if he can be their kicker. That's something to watch. You also have Eddie Lacy's... this really pisses me off. For the average Joe out there, this has got to... Give me a break. The guy's trying to eat himself out of the game. Already lost a job in Green Bay. Now he's in Seattle. He has to weigh in 7 times this year. He gets $55,000 for each month achieved. He nailed it the first time. He came in at 253. He's got another weigh-in coming up in June and August. He keeps tweeting he loves China food. That's what he calls it. But, hire a chef. Do something. Where's his agent, his personal advisor? Put a lock on a kid's refrigerator. But the weight incentives breakdown, so far so good he passed there. I don't know, Ted. Is he do anything for you? The fact that it can even be on the field with his weight issue?
Well, let's put it this way. Seattle has 11 running backs on the roster right now. Lacey's just one of them. And, I mean, they paid him money. The weight is, I mean, it's a significant amount of money you're talking about. He had to be under 255 in May, under two.
He can make $380,000.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice chunk of change. So he's trying to uneat his way back into the league, I guess, after making his first weight incentive. But, you know, the running back position, if you have a decent offensive line, you'll have a decent running game. I don't worry about whether it's going to be Eddie Lacy or somebody else, but he is a guy that's making headlines. Another guy that's making headlines this offseason is everyone saying, oh, they're going to trade Richard Sherman, and Richard Sherman's going to go, and all these rumors about Richard Sherman because Seattle added 4 defensive backs in the draft, all in the 3rd and 4th round. So not guys that are projects, guys that in theory are supposed to be able to come in and give Earl Thomas or Cam Chancellor or Richard Sherman a little bit of competition. Pete Carroll's quote, we're trying to build this roster to make it as competitive as we can. We haven't changed our tune on that at any time since we've been together because that's the way you do it for us. It's the way we think. It's the way we operate. Sometimes there are opportunities where guys come to you, and even though you have another good player at that same position, it's rare you could get a guy like that at that level, and we take him. We're not just drafting for the future. We're not just drafting for right now. This is a strong draft in the DB section, so it just kind of happened. We had opportunities to get guys. We may put together one of the great backup groups you've ever seen, and that may be what this is for the future. That would be a great thing that happen. But meanwhile, allow these guys to compete to start, and that pushes Earl, and it pushes Cam, and it pushes Sherman, it pushes everybody out here. That's how it goes, and they know that. Long quote from Carroll, but I think it speaks volumes about what he wants to do, bringing that competition in. But it's not just about competition. It's also, Pauly, about a bunch of guys coming back from injury.
Yeah, injury update. Lockett, who broke his leg in Week 16, he's on track to come back. Chancellor is coming off double ankle surgery, which was cleanup in his ankles that Carroll said he's had problems with for years. He's not back to full speed, but he's working. Thomas broke his leg last year, did not need surgery. He's working hard. They hope to have him back as well. What do you have on the schedule?
Well, last year, much easier than the average. In fact, it was the single easiest schedule in the NFL based on final records, which helped Seattle go 10-5-1 straight up in a year where they were a pretty mediocre football team in a lot of ways. This year, once again, they are easier than average, in large part because no other team in the division is lined above 500, and a couple of little hidden benefits for Seattle schedule-wise. We worry a lot about West Coast teams traveling east for early start game. We talked about San Fran. They have to do that 3 times in a 4-week span. Well, Seattle has a grand total of 1 early start game all year, Week 14 at Jacksonville. Every other game is a late start or a night game, very favorable in that regard. NFC West faces the NFC East and the AFC South this year. Seattle's 2 extra games at Green Bay, and of course they will get Atlanta at home in playoff revenge.
You're asking an awful lot. They got to win 11 games here to go over. God, that's tough.
Yeah, but you know, my gut reaction going into my Seahawks analysis was, yeah, I don't know about this team. And the more I've been reading and the more I read and the more I looked, I wouldn't bet them under. It'd be, Seattle is going to be elite again this year. They've been at the top of that division, and they once again look very much like the best team in the NFC West by a fairly wide margin.
All right, and AFC East next week. Also soccer with Nigel Seeley, and we'll continue the NBA. Who knows, might have a whole week off if we get 2 sweeps. Money time, play of the day. I don't like Kenny Hill, but Teddy likes TCU. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't like Kenny Hill either. He had a bad spring game. So what? Okay, we're talking about a program that has had 7 or more wins in the regular season, 10 of the last 12 years. Gary Patterson is not in decline. There is a whole lot of returning talent for TCU on both sides of the football. And look at the schedule. We're not talking brutal here. TCU, over 7, minus 125. That's the one that jumped off the page at me from the CG openers. I think this team should be lined a good notch or 2 higher. Horned Frogs, over 7. You're going to push at worst, and I think this is one you may cash with relative ease.
All right, very good. Fun week of shows. We're back next week. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you Monday on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.